the humor had a lot to do with it, but quite honestly, I have to humbly appreciate that they wouldn't be anywhere without me.
Welcome to the Humourology Podcast with me, Paul Barros. This is where we put the fun into business fundamentals. My guest on this edition of the Humourology Podcast is a legendary figure in the music industry whose career has shaped the sound of British punk and new wave. As the co-founder of the iconic Stiff Records, he helped launch the careers of some of the UK's most influential artists, including Elvis Costello, Ian Dury, Madness and the Pogues. A former tour manager for Jimi Hendrix and Van Morrison, his keen eye for talent and unorthodox approach to the music business made Stiff Records the birthplace of a musical revolution. Beyond Stiff, he played a crucial role at Island Records, overseeing the success of U2 and compiling Bob Marley's best-selling Legend album. With a career marked by innovation and a knack for spotting the next big thing, my guest has been called the godfather of indie labels. Dave Robinson, welcome to the Humourology Podcast.
Good, Paul. Good to see you.
It's really good to see you. And we've been brought together by our mutual friend, Mark Bedford, Bedders from Madness, who you have known since he was a mere strip of a lad.
Indeed. 1979, I met him. August 1979. And he's been a friend since. He's a very solid man. And
he's a very solid man.
And in a very difficult career item, with particularly the people he has to share it with, the Maddie boys, he's been very steady in my life.
That's proper bass player, isn't it? Proper steady.
He's a real bass player too. So he's very good in the movie. Take it or leave it. He, if you ever see it, if anyone ever sees it, he plays a very humorous part with Woody, the drummer. Where they joined the band. There's a very funny bit, and he's a great. They're all really good actors, and remarkably, all of them have real ability. They could have gone on to greater things on the, with the camera. The videos were good fun to make, all very humorous, all very funny, and that was the hook really of the band with the general public.
Do you think that Madness would have been Madness? You directed the videos, you owned Stiff Records, you guided their career. Do you think Madness would have been as big without the humor that you brought out in the videos?
Yeah, the humor had a lot to do with it, but quite honestly, I have to humbly appreciate that they wouldn't be anywhere without me.
I'll clip that bit for Bedders. Let's take it back to the start. You grew up in Dublin. Was humour valued in your family?
Not really. Not. I can't look back. I mean, I found life to be humorous myself from a very early age. I went to a boarding school, and without humour in Ireland, with all those priests kind of looping around, without humour, you wouldn't really have survived. So my father really told about 3 jokes. He had 3 pat jokes, which you heard once a week, perhaps. And I always laughed at them. My mother always said, don't humor him. I said, I'm not humoring him. There's only 3 jokes. What can I give my father except a bit of laughter? So I was always taken by the coincidences of life, where you planned what you planned, which usually didn't work out, and then some remarkable coincidence would arrive, amuse you, and hopefully from time to time actually push you forward. And that's been the basis of my life generally. One coincidence after another.
We'll get into all the coincidences, which I think are myriad, as we go along. But you mentioned that you grew up around priests, and the Jesuits have a saying, which is, give me a child of 7 and I will give you the man. Was the young Dave Robinson humorous?
Well, I wasn't with the Jesuits. I'm sure all the Jesuits that they've got, 7-year-olds, I'd worry about a lot of them. But so maybe the Jesuits. One Jesuit you have to think about is the gentleman who owns Ryanair. Now he came from a Jesuit, and the Jesuits are very sneaky as a collection of clergy, a kind of a they are noted by other Catholic collections of clergy as being a bit sneaky. They lasted longer than a lot of other people, and they always the lot that I was with, several of them, always thought the sandals and the brown garb that they wear in the kind of monks, they always thought it was a bit of camouflage of how sneaky they were, because they're just like women in a dry cleaners. The priests are very sarcastic about their other brethren, so to speak.
All right. So was your school experience a tough one, which you dealt with humor, which you touched on, or I mean, you could see the funny side of it?
Well, I can really. My mother, when I was 4 and a quarter, my mother took me to see this nun in a large building, and at the end of it, she left. So I thought she'd obviously made a mistake and gone to the loo or something, but she never returned. And the nun at the time said, "Come along, David. I want you to meet Errol." And Errol came into the room. Errol was a Trinidadian black guy. I'd never seen, obviously, anyone with a different color. And he was very tall. And he came and took my hand and led me off to very exciting times. He was my mentor for a year, my first mentor, and a very nice guy. I stayed in touch with him till I was about 30 odd. And unfortunately now, I don't know, I think he may have passed on, but he was my mentor. And that was a kind of a coincidence to begin with. And certainly he was very funny. He told jokes, and I appreciated them after I'd got over the difficulty of my parent deserting me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's always must be tough. My friend Henry Marsh, who was in a band called Sailor, who you might remember, Girls, 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 Glass of Champagne.
I do. Were they on Chrysalis?
No, they were on CBS, on Epic, actually.
Were they? Sailor.
And everything. But he went from the age of 7 to Sherborne. And just the stories of, like, trying himself to sleep for a year.
Oh yeah, no, it's very difficult. I'm very adaptable, and Errol was very good, talking me through whatever problems I might have had. As a result, that I've been at boarding school very early. My parents didn't get on, so that was the reason I was given. But when I was about 8, because I'd been there 4 years, I was given the job of looking after the bedwetters, who are the poor boys whose parents have subsequently also deserted them, and they obviously felt a connection and had trouble adjusting, shall we say. So it taught me a great deal about how to deal with musicians in later life. I had no trouble.
Dave Robinson says all musicians are bedwetters.
Yeah, pretty much. So yes, it was a very good experience, and boarding school was an experience all round. I mean, there were moments of all kinds, as there are in any life, but it was difficult because you were out of sight of authority, so to speak, and if you did have the authority, it could be quite oppressive. So yeah, I look back on it as being quite a humorous time. I enjoyed elements of it, and there's other bits that I've got over.
Well, that's it. Well, throughout your career, whether it was managing and road managing Van Morrison or working with Jimi Hendrix, which is extraordinary to me, or running Stiff Records, humor seems to have played kind of like a key role in your approach. How has humor helped you navigate the challenges of the music industry? And do you believe it's essential for success in such a high pressure environment?
I never really took it seriously, I never entirely took it seriously, and that was my method of progression. Obviously, there are times when it is serious, but as Dave will tell you, being a young photographer, which is my first kind of job out of school, where I did photographs of young kids, which in Dublin there was plenty of work of that nature because they were they're like rabbits in terms of producing children. And so, I also got weddings to do, and I did stuff where I'd take a prop into a pub, like a blow up Guinness bottle, and get people to hold it while I fleece them. No, that's not true. I, al- I also was a smudger, was known as a smudger. My very first job in Bognor Regis, and I came over to England, beach photographer at Butlins, and that was a revelation. That was fun. That was a kind of an exciting time, and it hadn't occurred to me either what might happen in those kind of circumstances and situations. I got threatened by a wrestler. I don't think it was. I don't think it's a known wrestler, but part of the entertainment was wrestlers on a Thursday, and the wrestlers would come down and stay on the campus. And the wife of a wrestler decided I was something, and so I took her photograph, 6 or 7 times a day, till eventually her husband came and said, "Here, mate, if you take another picture of my wife, I'll tie you in so many knots that you'll never escape." So thereafter, I had to jump in the bushes every time she came to have her picture taken again. I thought it was just great because I made quite a bit. I got a commission, so I made money off the few women who wanted regular photographs.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a euphemism. I took her picture,
Yeah. Yes. Well, it is. Yeah. No, it didn't go that far, really, in this instance. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's amazing. One of the things about you, and Mark Bedford and I have talked about you over long lunches, and he's obviously a big fan, but you toured for 2 years with Jimi Hendrix, which
Yeah.
is already extraordinary for me. Who was taken very, very seriously as a musician in the UK. However, I've heard you say that some of his stage antics, like playing the guitar behind his head, and were influenced by the Chitlin circuit in the States. Was Jimi Hendrix humorous, and did he see what he was doing as pure entertainment or cabaret, if you like, or was that just showmanship?
No, he was a great guitar player. He had two interests in life, really: playing the guitar and blonde women. And he just fluctuated between the two, or connected both of them together if he could. He was a lovely guy. He was very shy, um, very shy. Yet when he got on the stage, he was a whole different person. The Chitlin circuit is a remarkable circuit, which we don't particularly have in the UK or Europe, where, Little Richard, Muddy Waters, all those kind of artists played entirely in black clubs and black, you know, uh, places generally. And they all came up from the segregation period in the South, for example, where, you had a situation where the band couldn't stay in the hotel, but their driver could because he was white. And they all had white drivers because otherwise they couldn't open the door and do various things. Also, they're quite hard on each other. I mean, Little Richard's famous expression for Jimmy when he turned up with a slightly ruffled shirt or something, saying, "As the only pretty boy in this band, you're fired." So So it was that kind of thing. So you had to do a lot. You had to pull your finger out big time. You couldn't just play the guitar and look moody in a beard. You had to learn to do, so your chops had to be entertaining. And so there was a degree of entertainment in everything they did. Jimmy, to his amazement, really found that when he got to England, he would do very simple stuff that was minor on the Chitlin circuit, and the whole crowd would just fall at his feet and adore him. So it confused him greatly. We had long conversations on the occasions that we were together on planes and things, talking about that. I was very curious. I had in Dublin, being a photographer, I had worked for a magazine called Spotlight, who specialized in Irish show bands, who are like 7 or 8 piece collections of musicians, usually with a brass section, and who played 3 or 4 hours non-stop in very large sheds in the country. And they all specialize in something. For example, the Freshmen, who were from Northern Ireland, they were the Beach Boys. They were like tribute bands. So their thing was the Beach Boys. They had great harmonies. I mean, genuinely good harmonies. It wasn't pretend. They were all musicians, but they all had to do a bit as well. So I found Jimmy quite familiar with that. Also, I'd been, as I said, my first year was with Errol Julian. So I had no trouble of any kind and was totally baffled by the racism of America. I was totally baffled. I thought John F. Kennedy had sorted it all out before I got there. It turned out not at all. It was a very racist place. And Americans, God bless them, there are wonderful Americans, obviously, but they were all, in my mind, they were all the kind of refuse of Europe. They were all the kind of slightly odd Protestant kind of sects. And me being brought up a Catholic, you observe the religious persuasion. Like in London, you don't actually ask people what their religion is, but in Northern Ireland, you would tell quickly from their conversation which religion they were, and as a result, you'd have to take evasive action or otherwise. I did sell one of my jobs, talking about coincidences and the ability to get on with stuff. One of my jobs was selling Catholic Bibles in Northern Ireland, and I had to kind of find a Catholic house and then ask them to direct me to the next Catholic house, because you wouldn't want to turn up in the wrong house, which I did on various occasions, which taught me to sprint really fast. I am a very fast runner, even at my age now. And that was the reason I could outrun a London taxi easily, with the incentive of some guy shrieking abuse at you behind you. Anyway, I digress. Off to you, Paul. Yeah.
No, well, I was interested. You spoke about Jimi Hendrix being shy, and there's an old adage, if you remember, that performance is the shy person's revenge on the world.
Is that right? I never came across that. I might have to write it down afterwards. Shy,
Again,
blah blah. Yeah. Well, he was great, and he was confused at, we won't go into it. It's a long story about how Chaz Chandler saw him, was advised to see him in Cafe Wa in the Village in New York. And he was playing by himself, solo. And Chaz, coming from the London blues guitar scene of Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and whatever, he could see that this guy could play better than all the people that were revered in clubland in London. They were just starting to move out of clubland actually into bigger venues. But he could see that if he could quickly appraise the scene in London of Jimmy, so he got Jimmy to jam with people. He could ask Eric Clapton. In those days, you could ask, "Can I get up?" And they'd kind of look at you. And because Jimmy looked kind of interesting with the hair and everything, he got up and blew them away. Jeff Beck was leaving a venue when Pete Townsend was arriving. And Pete said to Jeff, "What, not much good, eh?" And Jeff Beck said, "You're dead. You're completely dead. You may as well jump into a box now." And that was, I thought, a great quote. But Jimmy was great. We toured America before touring America by English bands had become a regular thing. The Beatles, Herman's Hermits, the Animals, and them had been to America, nobody else. And so, there was no monitors, there was no big PAs, there was no criteria for what you were about to have to discover and perform. That is the logistics of getting to the gig and etc. Flight cases. I saw my first flight case in America. Now that was very orgasmic. I couldn't believe that a case had been made with a foam insert and you could put a 4x12 Marshall into it and it had wheels and would whatever. I thought that was, I really should have started a flight case business. I'd have been much wealthier and probably, we wouldn't be talking because I'd be on a beach somewhere in, Florida or somewhere. But America had a lot to offer in terms of technology. Ireland was up to 30 years behind, 25 years behind England, and England was 20 years behind America. So a lot of Irish guys went to America and brought back big businesses and big fortunes because they jumped the technology gap. The technology gap was a flight case with wheels. But anyway, Jimmy, people always ask about Jimmy. He was great. He was great fun. He produced my band. I had a band called the Heir Apparent, and that's the only band he ever produced. And that was a big favor. And I really appreciated it. But I realized his management didn't know anything about a musician. Being on the road is a whole different ballgame. I've always enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. So I'm just back now in my 80th year from touring in the north of Scotland. And aside from the midges, which they're oppressive, aside from them, what a beautiful place on good weather days. It's really fantastic. But touring is what we did too much of with Jimmy. The management, when Chas Chandler left for some musical difference, the manager was Mike Jeffries, not so funny, a kind of bit of a breadhead. And so we were doing impossible schedules, which I had to tour manage some of them. And you wouldn't, there was no time for the musician. There was no time for the artist. Having been in the boarding school and had that experience, it came very handy to me in touring America and looking after musicians. Mitch Mitchell was a little shit, and Noel Redding was really good and nice. I like bass players. I'm not that fond of drummers, and Jimmy was cool, but racism was very large. People forgot that Jimmy was, a different kettle of fish when they booked the band. So they would say very derogatory things to me about, racial situations, while forgetting that the person who'd pull all the tickets and pull the people into the venue was, not of their kind.
Well, wasn't it true that actually they didn't like any of the black acts, the BB Kings and all those things? So those people were barely earning a living until the white acts came and said, these are the people.
Oh yeah, no, it was a white audience. It was a white audience. A promoter said to me, he said, "Dave, great to meet you." He said, you can be sure that I'll be running a very clean gig. There will be no ends allowed in the premises. And that was the case in pretty much every case. There was very few colored people, black people, Indian people, yellow people. They're all white, young, university kind of white kids. And, some of them are great, but I don't know if you've seen a group of them at work with a few beers in, I mean, you could do without it.
I lived in America from when I was 19 for a period of time, and I was in Berkeley, and I saw it close up, and that was liberal. But if you went down south, it was absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah,
it was those kind of things. You just mentioned that you literally just got back from a tour in northern Scotland, and you are now managing a band again, and also tour managing Hardwick Circus. Please tell us a little bit about them and how you have still got the drive and the energy to be doing that now.
Well, it's a kind of coincidence, as I've said all along. My son, who's a photographer, and was working part-time at that, felt, not by my instigation, but felt that he'd like to manage a band. He liked music. He followed bands. He lived in Camden Town, so he knew all the Camden Town situation. And he passed a pub that he knew there was no music in. There's never any music in this pub. And he heard a band playing. So he went in thinking, I might take a photograph, and curious. So he found a young band playing in the middle of the floor, and he thought they were really good, took some pictures, and he spoke to the landlord, who he knew vaguely. And the landlord said, well, they came in this afternoon and asked me if they could play, and I couldn't see why not. So they'd come from Carlisle on the border with Scotland, and they'd come down with a lot of gumption, and they'd walked around Camden Town and asked a lot of publicans, and he had allowed it. And also the Dublin Castle had given them a show the following night.
Which is where Madness started.
That's
their first gig.
Absolutely true. It's where I started. But so he wanted me to put my name on the contract, because he felt that would encourage the parents that he'd met, because the father had driven them down, the father of the lead singer, very young guys, 18, 19. And so I said, fine, as long as I don't have to do anything, I can advise you now and then, solve the odd problem, but I'm not doing any work as such. So he guaranteed that he'd be the worker. So we both took on the band, and we got things going well for them, fairly well. A young band nowadays is just very difficult. Major record companies have never been much good, and I dislike all of them and always have done. So Stiff was an extension of that dislike. Jake and I, who started Stiff, both disliked major record companies because we managed some people and they were signed to major record companies, and we were always very skeptical. So fine, a year goes by, and my son says, look, I've got this offer, this great photographic offer. You're my dad. Can you advise me what I should do? And I thought, just what I need. So at this point, we had a very good relationship with the band, and I couldn't see that I could walk away from it. So he did, and I didn't. So I've been there ever since. We've been together 5 or 6 years now, and they have made great headway and put out several albums on their own record label, and done a lot of tours, played with Bob Dylan. They've done Glastonbury, done a lot of good stuff. But that alone doesn't make it happen for you. The days when people had to own their music, in other words, they had to purchase, if they liked a song or they liked a band or they liked an album, they would buy it. Those days were the good days. Streaming is just a joke in terms of trying to form a career. The big biggies with the big record company backing can go into the stratosphere, but young bands struggle a lot. So we tour a lot. You play live a great deal and hope to attract different people. And this band, very good songwriters, which I've always signed, and we've had a good relationship so far. So I'm always thinking of Bob Dylan. He's a few years older than me, and we're on the never-ending tour together.
Let's hear something from Hardwick Circus. Which track would you recommend, Dave?
Walking on Broken Glass, Story of Life.
There's no two ways about it.
Records, because you were talking about, you've always chosen songwriters and everything, but Stiff Records became legendary not just for its roster of groundbreaking artists, it also the irreverent marketing. This is the Humourology podcast, was part of that, including my favorite slogan ever, which is, if it ain't stiff, it ain't worth a fuck. I just thought that was genius. How important was humor to the identity of Stiff Records, and how did it contribute to the label's success?
It was all essential. It was all very essential. A good slogan, I thought, would encourage a member of the public who didn't know the band to investigate, to go to a record shop even and try it out, or pay attention with the radio and see if the band resonated. So the slogans were what attracted people, and inevitably the funny slogans were the winners. If it ain't stiff, it ain't worth the fuck. I mean, that's very funny on several levels, and it's all to do with yourself. We were sued for obscenity by the Metropolitan Police, which of course we won easily, and it proved to be a great marketing scheme, which sold an awful lot of T-shirts. One of my favorite, there's an awful lot of, you could go through a lot of ad copy, but the one I really like is an Ian Dury ad that I dreamt up at the time. I think it must have been in a bar, where it says, "Don't fart before your arse is ready." And that had a huge spike. that ad had a huge spike in the sales. An awful lot of people seemingly found that to be a great introduction to Ian Dury's music, and we sold a lot of records.
You did sell a lot of records. I love that. Don't fart until your arse is ready. Well, you mentioned Ian Dury, who had a very sharp wit and a very strong personality. He's Hit Me With a Rhythm Stick was #1 all over the world, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But humor was very important to Ian Dury's appeal. How did you help manage that, or did you just allow it to happen?
No, I managed Ian for a couple of years before I stopped managing him, handed on to somebody else, and then signed him to the record company. So I knew Ian for a couple of years. I mean, managing Ian essentially gave him the rights to your wallet mainly, because no, he wasn't a great singer, and certainly at the time. He's a great actor. Ian was a marvelous actor. And he did learn to sing a bit. Chas Jankel, the guy that he hooked up with, that was a very good combination. And he always wrote very witty, double entendre kind of lyrics. And Chas supplied the kind of light funk rhythm that created a band called the Blockheads, who played it.
It was magnificent, magnificent. Had a love affair with Nina in the back of my Cortina. A seasoned up hyena could not have been more obscene.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's Ian was great, and he was very witty. He was very sharp, and he eventually won through. But it took a lot of effort, and signing him to Stiff was a big thing for him. His management wanted to sign him to EMI, but I thought I knew the material he was doing. I really liked it, but I thought EMI isn't going to see Ian Dury, 33-year-old crippled geezer with a big mouth, who will probably go to the meetings and say a few wrong things. So I just waited my time. I knew that I would be the place of least resistance. And so I got the record I wanted, New Boots and Panties. And what a cracker.
Oh, I honestly tell you that I've bought it 3 times, that they're originally on disc and then on compact disc and then sort of like downloaded it on Apple, because it's still one of my favorite all-time albums. It's a complete album, isn't it? Every track on that album is a banger.
Well, you see, that's that happens quite a lot, really, insofar as most people move on. But a lot of their early songs you need to go back to. I always that was my one of my techniques was to say, I want every song that you ever wrote. You know, Paul McCartney's first song he wrote was When You're 64. Anyway,
That
that's
was his
his,
first song.
yeah,
No, John, I didn't know that.
yeah, that was his first one. He wrote it for his dad after some discussion about an age that he thought he would never reach, kind of, yeah, as you do when you're very young. So that was one. Anyway, Dury had written an awful lot of early stuff, and Chaz put a lot of stuff to music that had already been put out. The problem with Ian was he wasn't very musical, but he wanted to be, and he pretended he was, but of course he wasn't. He's a Taurian. He's like me, a bull in the china shop, but always fixated about knowing what he wants, and he wasn't always great at looking at the other side of the coin. But his lyrics and a lot of things very Taurian. I'm not a huge Birdseye fan, but I do from time to time. I have noticed coincidences in people's birth signs, and including my own. And so I have from time to time used that to uncover hidden areas. Yeah, it was fantastic. Ian and I had a very good relationship to when he passed away, and but he wasn't a musician. Yet he wanted. See, finding a Chaz Jankel was the key to it all. He, as the lyric writer, also making the arrangements of the music was wrong. It was a thing that didn't kind of function. There's always something you have to look into that's a bit difficult. And music business is like winning the lotto. So you have to play it, but you may not come home.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's really interesting because one of the reasons I wanted you on the Humourology podcast is because humor seems to be such a through line in your life. You work extensively with acts like Madness. Ian Drury were just talking about Reckless Eric, who I actually, I love things like Take the Cash, which nobody plays anymore, but it's just one of my favorite songs.
Well, he is a very humorous, and he's just starting to have a career now.
Is he again?
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. But he never really had one. It was like he had 3 or 4 songs. He was, he was not. He didn't know how to get on, really. I mean, you had to have charity to be behind Reckless Eric. So I'm very charitable, obviously, from my Catholic upbringing. And he's probably one of the few people who give me bad press. He says I ruined his career, which is amazing because I never understood he had one. But uh, he now has one. He's married a very pretty young punk folk singer from America, very nice girl. And I think they met when he was somewhere probably pissed out of his mind, and she did Whole Wide World. And so that amazed him, and he got the gumption together to speak to her. So they're married now, and they have an act where she sings the punk songs. He harmonizes and plays the kind of grumpy old man. So it's like typecasting, and it works very well. Whole Wide World was taken by Expedia for a worldwide ad. So that got incredible coverage and elevated, aside from elevating his bank account for a bit, elevated his career, particularly in America. And I think recently the UK, there has been a lot of Reckless Eric, but he was always good. Take the Cash, you're right. Nobody kind of really quite grasped that. He had Reconnaissance Cherie and various other songs that were actually very, very good. Yeah. Funny gigs are Reckless. I mean, I very seldom saw him sober. There's a song about that. There's an Irish song, very seldom sober. There's like Reckless Eric, very seldom sober, but he is now. I believe he's on the wagon, and for several years, and this is working very well for him. He's very funny. He's very witty. He talks he's got a whole accent, very odd accent, and he's quite a witty guy. And people are discovering his sense of humor. Before he was just the obnoxious drunk in the corner. Now he's coming through as a real person.
It's funny that this through line of you just said reckless is funny, injury, madness, and everything, but you also had a huge hand in Tracy Ullman having a music career.
Yeah. Yes.
And what
Yes.
I'd forgotten the other day, because I was looking at the old videos, and Paul McCartney does a cameo in her "They Don't Know" video. How the hell did you get Paul McCartney to drive a car as a cameo in her video?
Well, it took a lot of it took a lot of coincidences to get that to happen, and Paul eventually, who I knew briefly, he's a lovely guy. I first took his pictures in 1962 in the Cavern. Not that he remembered me particularly. I was doing a piece for a pop magazine of the Liverpool Sound, and I was taking the picture. I didn't do the chat. I didn't do the lyrics. I just did the pictures. But I called up I knew his tour manager, Trevor. I said, Trevor, Tracy is crazed to have Paul McCartney in the video. What are the chances? And he said, none. I said, yeah, okay. I'll go back to her. At least I've tried. I said, I only need him for 10 minutes. And he said, 10 minutes? That's it. I said, yeah, that's the pitch. So he said, I'll go and try that. So he went to Paul, and Paul said, because he didn't do anything, because he'd be in everybody's video. So he said, if he only does 10 minutes, fine. But I want you there with a stopwatch. And if he goes over it, you can tell him he can't use it. If he goes over 10 minutes, it's anything he's taken is not to be used. So I set up the whole thing outside his office, set up a whole backdrop and whatever. And I got that little Robin, the 3-seater car that they're in, Tracy and Paul with the furry dice, all very funny. So he came down, and Trevor had his clipboard, and he got in, and we ran the bit of the song. And I just wanted she just wanted to kind of schmoodle with him a bit, and he had to do that. So we took one take, and I said, cut. And he said, what? I said, that's it. Thanks very much, Paul. He said, well, you're finished, because he had made several videos, and he was used to the English method of dragging shit out and unions and crap. I when I did that movie with Madness, none of the sound men to begin with had batteries in the remote mics, because they were used to people doing 20 takes, and they thought, I'll put the batteries in for the 18th take, because that'll be what they'll keep. I said, no, I only do one take. I don't do any other takes. I'll do one take. So you have to have them in all the fucking time. Anyway, Paul said, is that it? I said, yeah. I said, the other thing, Paul, one small matter. I said, you've only used up 5 minutes. I'll be back for the other 5. and I sent him an email last year when he did Glastonbury, and said, look, I'm having real trouble getting my band Hardwick Circus on to Glastonbury. Can you do anything? And he got them on.
Oh, well, that's a proper mate and a proper story, isn't it?
That's a real independent record company. That's what they do. I had a slogan that said, don't rely on miracles, count on them.
Wow. But I mean, I've got a background in psychology. From a psychology point of view, it's really, I can see why you were such a success, is because you've got this can-do, everything's going to be fun attitude, And people want to go along with that. They want to have fun, whether that's Paul McCartney or Jimi Hendrix.
Well,
Or
yeah. Well, Stiff was all about the slogans. See, you like the slogan. You know, we had T-shirts. I had one that was really good. Said "Money talks, people mumble." You know, and that's that. We had funny T-shirts, and I love proverbs, and I find proverbs to suit every circumstance. And I tell the person in the circumstance what the proverb is, and you got a bigger chance of actually making it work by doing that. You know, I tell everybody that you an Irish proverb is you can't go without the horse. And the horse in the independent recording is a song. You can't go without the great song. You don't get anywhere. So that's it. There are loads of great proverbs that are really useful.
I love that, because I mean, it kind of goes back to the sort of Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah,
You know,
no, it's you need to get something that people resonate, something that resonates with the music. You know, you try and teach fans that they have no idea how clever the chords are. They don't know what you're doing. So for God's sake, make the guitar solo look a little difficult, right? Instead of looking completely cool, etc., etc. So there's all those adages. I learned a lot from Chas Chandler, who was the bass player in the Animals, and
animals,
he
yes.
he co-managed Jimmy in the first place. And Jimmy made a real mistake in getting rid of him. They didn't get rid of him. They had musical differences because Chas was very meat and two potatoes, and Jimmy was dreaming about colors in the sky. You know.
Oh, no, given your experience with so many extraordinary music styles over so many years, what do you think that special sauce is that makes people charismatic? And is humor vital in that equation?
It's all down to the songs. It's all down to the song. You can stand on your head. You can do what you like. There's a guy in America when I was over there that was on TV late night every night, and I can't remember. I think his name was Wallington or something. But his slogan was, "I'll stand on my head to make you a deal." He sold secondhand cars from 12 o'clock to 4 in the morning on all those old movies,
I remember it.
And and he did stand on his head. He was on the car standing on his head. And I thought, I got to use that, when we were doing Madness stuff. I used it in an Alexi Sale video called "Hello, John, Got a New Motor." Yeah.
Hello, John. Got a new motor? Yeah. Did you make that video as well?
Yeah.
Oh God, I didn't even know that. Of course, because I come from the comedy and music world, and I ended up having hit records with my band Morris Minor and the Majors. And actually, when you look at our videos now, we are stealing from Madness and all that, because it was all about the performance. It was all about the energy and getting that on.
You had it's a remarkable time, and Stiff had the benefit of that, where MTV was happening, and all the British TV stations had pop shows that took videos because of MTV, and so that was a great period, and that's what did a lot of damage for Stiff. So we had the video. I mean, Madness is a perfect example. We had a video, and people would queue up. The TV stations would queue up for the next one. They hadn't seen it, but they assumed that it would be something. And so, we would give an exclusive to get a really good TV appearance, and all that was very handy.
But it all came back to humor to an extent, but the song to an even greater extent.
It's all about the songs. Nowadays, it's all about, some of the songs or bits of the songs or samples of the songs. But nowadays, I always complain that I didn't get into the music business to meet computer programmers. I really didn't. So, I'm not that fond of that. I think there should be a chart that says the cabaret chart, and Taylor Swift and all those other people could be in that chart, and they'd be very happy. Whereas the music chart, I'd like my band to be in. I started the independent chart. I was part of the committee that got that together because we wanted something where we were putting our money into it. It wasn't just because they're independent. Now they call it indie music, but before, because it would be in the indie chart. But the indie chart was the reason was independent record companies got together to convince Music Week and media generally that there should be a second chart, because the first one was entertainment, was cabaret, everyone dancing, marvelous.
No, yeah. I mean, it's just extraordinary the way the whole music business has gone, and we could go on talking about that.
They should take the music word out of it and just call it the industry or something else. It's not about music.
Well, do you think, I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about America and, the racism you saw when you were touring with Jimi Hendrix in the 60s. I've been watching what the Democrats are doing with Kamala Harris and this humor and joy coming up. Do you think that is enough to cut through in America, or are we going to have a Trump presidency? Not a big question.
I hope that we won't get Trumping it. If Trump gets in, I've got a little bit of land on an island in Ireland that I bought way back. I mean, when I say a little bit, we're talking about 2 acres, right? And I'm going to get the digger in to dig the bunker if Trump gets in, because there's no way anyone in their right mind would elect that guy. That guy is absolutely useless. He's not even very clever, but he seems to has seemed to is resonate with a certain element of middle America that have felt uptight, for years, because Washington was where politics happened, and the reality of poverty and terribleness in an awful lot of middle America is just not acknowledged. They've got biggest economy in the world, but all the fat cats are paying no tax, doing whatever. I couldn't understand when Labour wanted to get back in. I'm not particular for any politician. I like people. Keir Starmer seems, I mean, compared to the Conservatives that have just left, he looks great. He looked good because they were so terrible. So there's always a contrast, but you never know whether your choice is going to be wonderful. But what I never understood was Jeremy Corbyn. If I had Jeremy and I needed to market him, because I'm a marketing guy as well as a few other things, I would have had comedians write his scripts so that whenever he had Boris in Prime Minister's Question Time, he'd have a few really good gags that would make people laugh at Boris. Because Boris, you needed to laugh at him. He's a bumbling idiot, and his Conservative people, very similar to Trough's followed him. They now say not to a great place, but it was obvious to the average public, or people, particularly like yourself or maybe myself in the media, who observe people. You say psychology, etc. So you're looking at through various glasses at the people and what they're doing. The public don't have that, that immediate focus. But it is kind of criminal when politicians support somebody who's obviously criminal. It's criminal to follow them. And humor would have, because he got a lot of laughs out of Keir Starmer, who can't really think on his legs. He can't stand up and crack it. A lot of people can. But I thought, get a good comedian. Get a couple of good comedians and give you a couple of lines that you can bang out there. The public, once they start laughing at these people, won't follow them.
You were talking about Jeremy Corbyn and giving him comedy lines, but you can't get everybody to deliver a good comedy line. I work with people all the time who can't do it.
Yeah, but you tailor it to the individual. I mean,
Yes.
Jeremy having half a funny line would be amazing. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
he was always talking about Angela in Brentford who had a problem with her blah, right? I mean, there was great comic possibilities there. With
I agree, but
all he
I
had to
agree.
do, all he had to do is find Wendy in Plymouth with a funny line, and people would have totally cracked up. It was like a
I agree.
script. It was like a script that you could write about politics. You know, hey minister, yes minister. I mean,
Yeah.
that's very funny, and particularly funny when you add a conservative party into it, when you compare it, because that's what they're talking about. Yes, minister, but you don't understand. You know what I mean?
Well, I
It's
do know what you mean. We've had William Hague on the show, and
oh
yeah,
yeah.
William was great. But you know that it was Alistair Campbell who told us. He said we were fearful of William Hague at Prime Minister's questions because he could deliver great comedy lines.
There you have it. Yeah, there you have it. See, once people laugh at people rather than laugh with people, there's the two essence of what you're trying to do. The kind of videos that Madness made, where for everyone to have a really good laugh, you know, late night, a couple of pints and a really good laugh. And what happens to humor is you A, turn on other people onto it, and B, you replay it. You replay it ad infinitum. So humor is was Stiff's secret weapon. We once took an ad, and the bottom line said we were being distributed by EMI at the time, and it said "Stock now while EMI lasts." And I got a letter from the chairman of EMI, who is Sir whatever his name was, you know, because he had no sense of humor. He couldn't laugh at it. And he
Well,
was very uptight and suggested that he would have legal recourse and blah blah blah. No, fun is great.
well, fun is great. And there's a saying in psychology, which is if you want anyone to go into any state, you have to go into that state first. And I think that's what you do. I think that's your special sauce, is you're having fun, the bands you're working with are having fun, and this actually translates to the audience. And they start to go, we're having fun because you're having fun. And the whole thing snowballs on that.
People are into fun. Fun is good. All
Yeah,
there's a lot of the other emotions that aren't so good, but fun is good and works all the time. If people will laugh at themselves, you have a lot of fun, you know.
absolutely. But can you be a great communicator without humor?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to look at the great communicators without you. I thought Winston Churchill was a remarkable communicator. I found him funny, but not a
He
lot of
did
other
deliver
people.
comedy lines a
Yeah,
lot, Winston
but he had big
Churchill.
lines. He had big lines. Now, funny enough, AI now is people are talking about it all over the place. And if you write anything on AI, if you go in there and brief the machine to give you something, it uses a lot of Winston Churchill lines.
Does it?
Yeah, yeah, they're very big. They're very big. The lines are very. We're on the beaches in you know, big places on the
I'm sure
mountains.
I'm sure it doesn't use his comedy lines. You know, the classic one when he was at a dinner party and he was pissed out of his head and he went to the toilet, and Lady Asquith saw him coming out of the toilet and she pointed and went, "Winston, your thingy is sticking out." And he goes, "Don't flatter yourself, madam. It's hanging out."
That's pretty good. Is that a line from his? I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I
It's, you
think
know,
people wrote them. Yeah.
yeah,
That's it. When some woman said you're drunk, and he said, "Yeah, yeah, you are ugly, but in the morning I'll be sober."
that's
So
it.
I got to think that a good scriptwriter was writing all those lines, you know. So.
Well, we started off by saying that we were brought together by Bedders, Mark Bedford from Madness. They've been together 43 years, 44 years, maybe even. humour a bond that keeps people together, like that social glue?
50 years they've been together. Yes. Well, uh, the music and the money helps, I suppose. You know, they've been together so long, from time to time they struggle perhaps to hang it together. But people like Bedders are great to have because they'll always be there, sussing each side out, not taking some terrible position on a business deal or a situation. And that's why Bedders is good.
I think he realizes that whole Shakespearean quote, which is, "A fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows he is a fool."
Bedders knows what he doesn't know. And that's a remarkable thing to be into. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
He's always been there, Mark. Always been a solid individual. Very, very tight, very good, and a great bass player.
Oh, superb bass player, and the bass player on what's the Robert? God, what's the song I'm trying to remember? Shipbuilding.
Oh yeah,
Do you remember
Elvis Costello?
Yeah, but Elvis wrote it, but then he recorded it with Robert Wyatt.
Robert Wyatt, yeah.
And that is still one of my favorite bass lines, but it's just such a beautiful song.
Oh, it's fantastic. I shot the video, I think so.
Yeah. Is there a video that you haven't shot?
Of course there is, but I have shot a lot of videos also by other people that are outside Stiff because they like the Stiff stuff. But if they didn't have a humorous element, then you couldn't put a humorous element into it because, what Madness and I used to call the funny. So we say, put the funny in here and put the funny in. And when they're editing, you always shot a couple of things that were over the top funny that would be useful. And, it's from the Carry On series. I was a big Carry On fan. In Ireland, that was the only kind of slightly risque movie genre that you could watch when I was young. And so there's a lot of Carry On in what I think is humorous and what we put in videos.
Dave, we've reached the part in the show which we like to call quickfire questions.
Quickfire questions.
Who is the funniest business person that you've met? Now, you're in the music business, so it can be anyone.
Well, one of the very funny people is Chris Wright from Chrysalis, right?
Oh, yes.
He's only funny because he says the most stupid things and never-endingly. He doesn't seem to have a grasp of people listening to him. I don't think he went to a boarding school where everything you say is being listened to by somebody, sometimes to your detriment. So you have to be kind of careful. So he says very funny things, and they're hilarious. I'm not going to describe them here, but they're very, very funny. And they kind of naively funny in an awful way. And he's he sees himself as a very serious businessman. And of course, he's made quite a fortune, and he's done very well. But he still, people who know him exchange Chris Wright sayings that he doesn't know are jokes, but are huge jokes afterwards, and people repeat them. So Chris Wright.
Well, he's going to know now, isn't he?
Well, yes. Well, that would be amusing. I mean, he's not that funny in a lot of other ways.
I'm just intrigued. You've known everybody in the music business. Who's the least funny person, living or dead, in the music business?
Mike Scott from the Waterboys. He takes himself so seriously.
You lived with Van Morrison for years and also managed him.
Well, Van is an acquired taste. He's not the greatest flatmate in the world. I can definitely say that. But he is a genius, and you will put up with geniuses a bit more than you would normally. He kind of ruined my social life in Dublin because he came to stay at my flat for a while, and I lost all my close social comrades at the time because he drove them all out. He doesn't like small talk. In fact, he doesn't like anything to do with anything that isn't musical or something. He talks music all the time. It's not. He's curious. He follows politics. He follows the world, but he talks music, and he's very, very short of comment. It's like yes, no, yeah.
I have run into him in New York, and I won't tell any too many stories, but the only conversations we could successfully have were when Mark, our mutual friend Bedford, had told me that if you ever meet him, just ask him about his sax playing, because he'll talk to you forever about the sax rather than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sax players are like that generally. Have you ever had a conversation with a sax player? You could be talking, you can talk about shaved reeds forever, and the names of them and how much you shaved them. And you haven't even got onto the instruments then at that point. That's another 2 days. I mean, sax players do talk about their instruments. They're very, obviously intimate, constantly in their hands and constantly practicing. And they're full of it. Yeah,
they're
something
full of
else.
it, literally.
They're full of it. Yeah.
What book makes you laugh, Dave?
I just read Alan Jones' book. Alan was the editor of Uncut and the Melody Maker before that he used to work for. And he's got a new book and asking me titles, and it's very, very difficult, but it's very, very funny. And it's all about trips he's made on behalf of record companies with bands to various venues where substances were abused by everybody, and the results are just the funniest thing. I could read his stuff forever. He's great. Alan Jones, 2 L's.
What film makes you laugh?
Mean Streets.
That
Scorsese,
makes you laugh?
one of Scorsese's early. Yeah, I think the actor was so funny in that.
Robert De Niro.
That's him. Thank you very much. Robert De Niro is very, very funny. And there's a couple of scenes where he goes over the bar and he does, he's really stupid. And he then, exaggerates it by doing some really terrible action. And I've found that to be very funny. I also loved the movie. I loved watching it, this kind of style of it, the kind of filming of it, etc. Had a lot of feel, which I thought was great.
So I mean, every music business person normally goes Spinal Tap, but is it too close to home?
That's it. Yeah, I didn't laugh at Spinal Tap. I knew far too many bands who had performed exactly like that in great seriousness. Yeah, no, terrifying. It was more terrifying than funny, I thought. Yeah.
We're going to take a shift to the other side briefly and say, what's not funny?
I don't know, really. I don't know.
Well, can anything be funny in your book?
Yes, yeah. I'm inclined to, even the difficult times, I'm inclined to try and find a funny angle that I can kind of be amused, or at least distract me to try and solve the problem or whatever is going on. But the Irish have a proverb for it. They say the 2 things you can't cure are the lack of sense and death. as in dying. So death and the lack of sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We love your proverbs on the
the Irish proverb on luck. There's several. The first one is the lucky man has only to be born.
Yes, like that.
And the second one is you have to believe in luck, because how else can you explain why people you can't stand are doing well?
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Good one. The Irish have a good one for pretty much everything. So I do run through proverbs in my mind from time to time, and laugh at people who aren't expecting to be laughed at,
No,
anyway.
What word makes you laugh?
Star. The word star makes me laugh. I have a slogan for stars, and I do explain it to people like, as in, um, a star is a person that nobody tells the truth to.
Oh, lovely.
The rule number one at Stiff was, the first thing you have to remember when people signed up to Stiff, I said, there's one thing I'd like you to dwell on, is that the sale of large numbers of records does not increase your IQ.
Nice. Well, it's the classic don't get above your station. What sound makes you laugh, Dave?
I like the sax note at the beginning of Night Boat to Cairo. I like that sax sound. And I was there when he made the sound, and I'm shaking the tree in front of him. So every time I hear that sound or look at that beginning of that video, I get amused by it, because the sound and the tree shaking, it's Carry On Up the Khyber or something. I don't know where it came from, but I got it from somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. And then everybody's going to remember that moment and just see
Yeah.
you standing.
So it's that kind of foghorn kind of noise. It's that, yeah, the foghorn blows. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I love that answer. Well, so penultimate question. You're obviously very, very, very intelligent. You've started record companies. You've made careers for,
I don't think you've described intelligence there. Go on.
Well, I think it is. Well, I think it's emotional intelligence at the very
Okay.
least.
All right. Well, I'll buy that. Yeah. I'll buy that. Yeah.
Would you rather be considered clever or funny?
I think most people think I'm funny. I don't think a lot of people think I'm very clever. Pete Waterman has got a good quote where he says, I thought somewhere during my career that if Dave can do it, I could easily do it. In fact, I could do it much better than him. And subsequently he did. So it can't be, he did better, so to speak. He made a silk purse out of a sow's ear very well.
Well, you can't define better though, can you? Really?
Good, better, best. Never let us rest till the good gets better and the better best.
Very nice.
That'll do for the finale.
Final question then. Desert island gags. If you could only take one joke with you to a desert island, what would it be?
It would be all religions state that there's a man upstairs with a big beard and he's watching the world, running things and watching the world. And he can see everything. He can see everything that you do independently and everybody. Remarkable grasp. But he has some commandments. He has some criteria that he wants you to obey. And if you don't, he might get quite angry with you and he might commit you to hell, which involves burning forever, for eternity, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Very hot, right? But he loves you. But he needs the money.
Yep, that just about encompasses it and everything. And that will give you years of fun on your desert island, I think, because you'll never get tired of that one. And we'll never get tired of chatting to you.
Well, it was good, Paul. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. I probably lost the track a bit from a few people hustling me on the phone, but that's normal. And my missus is, there's no way, aside from finding Tracy Ullman in a hairdresser's, there's no way that, now she's a Gemini. And do you know how to meet a Gemini at a party? You stand still and they pass you every 5 minutes. Anyway.
Oh, Dave Robinson, thank you so much. You keep talking about coincidence in your life. This has been a wonderful coincidence, but it's no coincidence that you've been so successful. Thank you so much for being on the Humourology podcast.
Yeah, all the best. Bye. Bye-bye.
The Humourology podcast was hosted by Paul Barros, produced by David Rose, music by Steve Hayworth, creative direction by Les Hughes, and additional research by Helen Sykes. Please remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This has been a Big Sky production.